We live in a time when the word humanity has become both a cliche and a cry for help. It's painted on protest signs, printed on t-shirts, spoken from podiums, but rarely practiced with consistency in everyday life. What does it mean to truly be human in a world that seems to be unraveling at every edge? Not biologically human, everyone is that by default, but morally human, spiritually human, ethically human. That is a very different and deliberate choice. It's a choice made in silence, in the mundane, in the personal, often unseen, and almost always uncomfortable. You see, there's this silent illusion many of us carry, that our lives are too small to matter, that our actions are too private to shift the larger world. But that's precisely where the illusion betrays us. Because history has always been shaped by individuals, by people who refused to let apathy harden their hearts, by those who believed that to be human was to care, to act, to sacrifice. The world is not suffering from a lack of power or technology, it's suffering from a crisis of moral responsibility, and this isn't something abstract. It's as close as your next conversation, your next choice, your next moment of silence when you could have spoken truth. The truth is, you are not neutral. No one is. Each of us is either participating in the healing of the world or in its further decay, and this begins with how we live, not just what we believe. The moral responsibility of being human is not a job title or a slogan. It's the quiet decision to be better than your instincts, to offer grace where you could deliver judgment, to confront your own darkness instead of projecting it onto others. So this isn't just a motivational talk, it's an invitation to examine the weight you carry, not as a burden, but as a profound opportunity. An opportunity to step into your humanity fully and consciously, to stop waiting for someone else to fix the world, and to begin the healing exactly where you stand. Because that's the only place healing has ever truly begun. Let's begin with something deeply uncomfortable but undeniably true. The greatest threat to humanity has never been war, famine, or disease. It has always been indifference, the kind of silent, passive neglect that allows suffering to flourish in plain sight. When we speak of being human, we're not just talking about biology, we're talking about conscience, about the capacity to see another person's pain and not look away. And yet, many of us do. Not because we're evil, but because we've been conditioned to believe it's not our place, not our problem, not our responsibility. But what if that's the lie that keeps the world fractured? Real humanity begins when you acknowledge that you are, in fact, your brother's keeper, that your actions or your inactions contribute directly to the kind of world we all have to live in. We talk about global issues as if they exist in some distant realm, disconnected from our homes, our neighborhoods, our habits. But the world is not something out there. The world is you and me and the millions of small, ordinary choices we make every single day. How we speak, who we listen to, what we tolerate, what we refuse to excuse. There's a kind of spiritual decay that sets in when we begin to see compassion as weakness, when empathy is mocked as naivety. But empathy is not softness, it is strength restrained by wisdom. It's the ability to feel another person's pain without being swallowed by it. And that takes more courage than cruelty ever has. Anyone can destroy, anyone can walk away. But to stay, to witness, to help, that takes character. And here's the paradox. The more we live only for ourselves, the smaller our lives become. Because meaning is not found in consumption, it's found in contribution. The people who are most alive, who are most grounded and joyful, are the ones who have learned that fulfillment doesn't come from getting more, but from giving more. And no, this doesn't mean sacrificing your identity for others. It means understanding that your identity is incomplete without others. Now, I understand this is hard, especially in a world that teaches you to look out for number one, to guard your time, your energy, your heart. But here's a radical idea. Maybe you weren't put here just to survive. Maybe you were put here to serve, not as a martyr, but as a moral agent, a conscious force of light in a world that too often rewards the shadows. That doesn't mean being perfect. It means being willing to learn, to listen, to change, to act. We all say we want a better world, but are we prepared to become better people? Because the two cannot be separated. You can't demand peace while you nurture conflict in your own home. You can't demand justice while you stay silent in the face of unfairness at work. You can't claim to care about humanity while treating the stranger in front of you as invisible. That kind of hypocrisy doesn't just erode our integrity, it dismantles the very foundation of the society we say we want to build. So where do we begin? Not with grand gestures, not with applause. We begin with presence, with attention, with the quiet courage to say, I see you, I hear you, you matter. Those words, when lived, are more powerful than any law, more transformative than any ideology. And that's the challenge, to show up fully, to rise, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because this world doesn't need more opinions, it needs more people who live like they mean it. The mirror is in front of all of us now. The question is, who are you willing to become when no one else is watching? Because that is the beginning of real humanity. One of the most overlooked aspects of humanity is the necessity of listening, not just hearing, but listening in the deepest, most responsible sense of the word. You see, in an age where everyone is trying to speak louder, post faster, argue harder, the discipline of truly listening has become almost subversive. We've built a world obsessed with broadcasting, but not with understanding. And yet, the fundamental transformation of any society starts with the ability of one human being to listen to another, not to debate them, not to fix them, but to witness them. Why does this matter so much? Because being heard is one of the most powerful affirmations of human existence. When you genuinely listen to someone, whether they're a child, a colleague, or even someone who's hurt you, you're saying your voice matters. Your experience has weight. That kind of attention is rare, and it is healing. Think about it. How many of the world's wounds are not just the result of violence or cruelty, but of being ignored, of feeling invisible? Listening forces us to suspend judgment, to momentarily put aside our assumptions, our need to be right, and to sit in the presence of another person's reality. That's not weakness, that's courage. And it requires humility, which is in short supply these days, because humility means acknowledging that you don't have the full picture, that maybe the person in front of you knows something you don't. Maybe their story could expand yours if you'd only let it. This is not about tolerating everything. It's not moral relativism. It's moral responsibility. Because if we claim to care about humanity, then we have to practice humanity at the level of conversation, of eye contact, of silence even. The battlefield of human connection is fought in the mundane, in the moments where someone says something we disagree with and we choose not to retaliate but to ask, why do you feel that way? That question alone can de-escalate years of division. The challenge is most of us are afraid to really listen because it might change us, and change is uncomfortable. It threatens our tidy beliefs, our neatly constructed identities. But if your values can't withstand a deeper understanding of someone else's pain, then maybe your values need refining. Growth demands that we confront not only what we don't know, but what we thought we did know and were wrong about. There's also something sacred about silence. In many conversations, we rush to fill the gaps, to prove our intelligence, to fix or explain. But silence is not a void. It's a vessel. When someone is in pain, you don't need to rescue them with words. You need to be there, fully, with your attention, with your stillness. That is more healing than any advice. Because at the core, people don't want to be solved. They want to be seen. And isn't that what we all long for? Not perfection, not applause, but presence. To be recognized not as problems or projects, but as people, messy, complex, worthy people. So the next time you're in a conversation, ask yourself, am I truly listening, or am I waiting for my turn to speak? Am I curious or just rehearsing my rebuttal? That self-awareness might seem small, but it's the beginning of transformation, and that's where the real work of humanity begins, not in public spectacles, but in private choices. Listening is an act of rebellion against indifference. It is an act of love in a world that's too often transactional. And in choosing to listen well, to listen deeply, you become more than a bystander to life. You become a builder of bridges, a restorer of dignity, and a true participant in the redemption of human connection. And that's not just noble, it's necessary. One of the deepest yet most quietly powerful acts of humanity is the willingness to forgive. And I don't mean the superficial kind of forgiveness, the kind we perform because it's socially expected or because it feels like the polite thing to do. I mean real forgiveness, the type that demands a deliberate confrontation with pain, betrayal, and the undeniable complexity of human imperfection. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is not passivity. In fact, it might be one of the most courageous and intellectually demanding things a human being can do. We often misunderstand forgiveness as a kind of moral surrender, as if letting go of resentment means the offense didn't matter. But that's a misreading of the process entirely. To forgive someone, you must first acknowledge the full weight of what they did. You must name it honestly. You must feel it without numbing it down or rationalizing it away. That means revisiting the wound. That means confronting your ego, your anger, your need for justice. And once you've done that, truly done that, then and only then do you decide to release it, not because the other person deserves it, but because you refuse to be imprisoned by it. See, this is what most people miss. Resentment is seductive. It gives us a sense of moral superiority. It makes us feel powerful, in control, justified. But in reality, it's corrosive. It eats away at your inner peace like rust on iron. It distorts your worldview. It darkens your lens. And over time, it can transform you into a version of yourself you barely recognize. Bitter, guarded, hard. You begin to filter every relationship through that lens of mistrust. You punish the innocent for the sins of the guilty. And worst of all, you become stuck. Because as long as you hold on to that grudge, part of you is still living in that wound. Forgiveness, paradoxically, is not about freeing the other person. It's about freeing yourself. It's about reclaiming your own narrative. When you forgive, you're essentially saying, this will not define me. This pain, however real, will not own me. I choose to move forward. And that act, though deeply personal, is also profoundly human. It's an affirmation that we are all flawed, all in process, all capable of both harm and healing. But let's not pretend this is easy. It's not. Forgiveness is messy. It's non-lunar. It doesn't always come with closure or reconciliation. Sometimes you forgive people who will never say sorry. Sometimes you forgive people who aren't even alive anymore. And that's okay. Because forgiveness isn't about restoring the relationship. It's about restoring yourself. It's about releasing the psychological burden you were never meant to carry indefinitely. You might ask, why should I let go if they don't even care? The answer is simple but profound. Because you care. Because your peace matters more than your pride. Because your future deserves more attention than your past. You don't forgive because they earned it. You forgive because you deserve peace. And in a world starving for justice, for accountability, for healing, those who practice true forgiveness are not naive. They are the architects of a better humanity. They model what it looks like to live beyond the reactive instinct, to transcend the basic emotional response, and to engage in something deeper, something sacred. So ask yourself honestly, what grudge have I been nurturing? What anger have I mistaken for strength? And what could my life look like if I finally put it down? Forgiveness is not forgetting, it's remembering without hate. It's choosing your soul over your scars. And in that choice, humanity breathes again. There is a kind of quiet dignity in service, a form of human expression so understated that it often goes unnoticed, yet so essential that without it, society begins to disintegrate from the inside out. We tend to admire the grand gestures, the big speeches, the publicized moments of charity or leadership. But real service, the kind that sustains families, communities, even civilizations, that's often silent. It's found in the routine, in the mundane, in acts so seemingly small they rarely make headlines, and yet they are the lifeblood of everything we hold dear. Think of the parent who wakes up early every morning, not because it's glamorous, but because it's necessary, to prepare food, to comfort a child, to keep a fragile household running. Or the caregiver who tends to the sick, not for applause, but because compassion compels them. Or the stranger who holds the door open, offers a kind word, or simply chooses to listen. These aren't heroic acts in the cinematic sense, but they are deeply human. They remind us that the most profound impact we can have often starts with seeing someone else's need and saying, without words, "You matter." We live in a culture that romanticizes independence. Autonomy is held up as the highest ideal, and yes, there is value in self-reliance. There's a strength in being able to stand on your own. But there is an even deeper strength in being willing to kneel, metaphorically or literally, to serve another human being. Because in doing so, you're not just offering help, you're affirming someone's humanity. You're saying, "You're not alone. I see you. I'm with you." That's a powerful message in a world that constantly encourages us to look out for ourselves and ourselves alone. Service is not weakness. It's not servitude. It's not the abandonment of personal ambition. In fact, real service requires strength, intellectual strength, emotional resilience, and moral clarity. To serve is to willingly take on responsibility. And responsibility, as any philosopher worth listening to will tell you, is the foundation of a meaningful life. When you carry something for someone else, when you make their burden lighter even by a fraction, you are stepping into your highest capacity as a human being. You are becoming not just useful, but significant. And here's the paradox. The more we serve, the more we grow. Service is not a detour from the path of personal development. It is the path. Because in service, we confront our selfishness. We refine our patience. We learn empathy, humility, discipline. These are not soft traits. They are hard-won virtues. They are forged through action, not abstraction. And without them, all the intelligence and talent in the world mean very little. Of course, service demands sacrifice. Time, energy, comfort. It will often go unrecognized. Sometimes it will be misunderstood, but that's the point. You don't serve for the applause. You serve because it's right. You serve because it shapes you into something stronger, kinder, more anchored. You serve because the world needs fewer spectators and more participants, people who are willing to step off the sidelines and say, "Let me help." So maybe the question we need to ask ourselves isn't, how can I be more successful, but rather, who can I serve today? Because the answer to that question will often lead us to the very success we're chasing, not in the superficial sense, but in the deeper, more enduring sense of meaning and legacy. The greatest among us are not always the loudest or the most visible. Often they're the ones quietly lifting others without expecting anything in return. And in doing so, they don't just change lives, they change the atmosphere. Be that person, not because it's easy, but because it's right. In the end, service is not just an act, it's a philosophy, one that, if lived consistently, can heal not just others, but yourself. When we talk about humanity, we often refer to compassion, cooperation, and kindness. But there's another side of humanity that is just as essential, yet frequently overlooked: the responsibility of protecting the vulnerable. This isn't just a social obligation, it's a moral imperative. It's not an optional feature of civilized life. It is the structure upon which civilization stands. And the moment we begin to ignore or downplay that responsibility, we risk slipping into something far less humane, something mechanical, indifferent, and ultimately dangerous. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's part of the human condition. From the moment we are born, we are dependent on parents, caregivers, communities. And as we age, that dependency changes form but never disappears entirely. We are all vulnerable in different ways at different times. To deny this is to deny reality. So the ethical challenge isn't to eliminate vulnerability. That's impossible. The real challenge is to decide what kind of people we will be when we encounter it in others. Will we exploit it? Will we ignore it? Or will we rise to meet it with strength, clarity, and purpose? The protection of the vulnerable, children, the elderly, the disabled, the poor, the marginalized, is not just the task of governments or institutions. It begins with us at the most individual level. It begins with our willingness to see, because often the vulnerable aren't loud. They don't demand attention. Sometimes they're even invisible to us because it's easier that way. It's easier not to feel the weight of another's suffering. But that ease comes at a cost, our own humanity. Every time we choose comfort over compassion, we make ourselves smaller. And protecting the vulnerable isn't just about defending others from physical harm, though that is certainly part of it. It's also about shielding them from emotional harm, social exclusion, spiritual neglect. It's about speaking up when silence would be more convenient. It's about creating environments, homes, schools, communities, where people feel seen, safe, and valued. That doesn't happen by accident. It takes conscious effort. It takes courage. It takes people who are willing to shoulder a bit of chaos so that others don't drown in it. The idea here is not martyrdom. It's not about burning yourself out trying to save the world. It's about alignment, aligning your actions with something higher than self-interest. When you choose to protect the vulnerable, you're not just doing something for them, you're also transforming yourself. You're training your mind to see injustice. You're strengthening your moral reflexes. You're reinforcing the idea that life isn't just about what you can take, but what you can give. Now, there's a risk. When you open yourself to others' suffering, you invite pain. You become more sensitive, more exposed. And yes, sometimes that hurts, but it also heightens your awareness, sharpens your empathy, and deepens your ability to love. And that is worth the cost. Because a life built around numbness is not a life fully lived. Protection, in its truest form, is not a barrier, it's a bridge between strength and softness, between power and responsibility, between who we are and who we could be. And maybe that's the real test of character, not how you treat those who can advance your interests, but how you treat those who can't. That's where your integrity shows. That's where your values become visible. So the next time you see someone in need, someone overlooked, outcast, or just quietly struggling, don't look away. Don't wait for someone else to step in. Be the one who does, because in that moment, you're not just protecting them. You're protecting what is best in all of us. True strength isn't measured by what you can dominate or accumulate. It's measured by how far you're willing to go to shield those who cannot shield themselves. That's the mark of a fully human life. One of the most quietly transformative things we can do in life is to recognize the dignity of others, not in the abstract, not in the grand, dramatic moments of heroism, but in the small, day-to-day interactions that often go unnoticed. The way you speak to the cashier at the grocery store, the way you look at the homeless man on the sidewalk, the way you respond to someone who's made a mistake. These moments may seem insignificant, but they are in fact the places where your values either materialize or they don't. Human dignity is not a matter of status or achievement. It's not something you earn by being successful or intelligent or attractive. It's inherent. It is what remains when you strip away the roles we play, the titles we carry, the possessions we accumulate. It's the unshakable reality that every human being, your neighbor, your enemy, your friend, your child, carries the same breath of existence, the same weight of being, the same capacity for joy and despair. And that is something we forget, often at great cost. Modern life encourages us to fragment others. We reduce people to opinions, affiliations, appearances. We label and dismiss them as though that somehow justifies treating them as less than human. It's easier that way. It protects us from complexity. It keeps us from having to do the hard work of understanding. But when we do that, we not only dehumanize others, we dehumanize ourselves. Because once you make a habit of seeing others as objects or obstacles, you start to lose touch with your own inner life as well. Seeing the dignity in others forces you to slow down. It forces you to ask questions you might rather avoid. What pain is this person carrying that I can't see? What led them to this moment? And how would I want to be treated if I were in their position? These are not easy questions, but they're necessary if you want to be someone who contributes to healing rather than division, someone who builds bridges instead of walls. And this isn't about agreeing with everyone or tolerating all behaviors. Boundaries matter. Accountability matters. But even when we disagree, even when we must oppose someone's actions, we can do so without stripping away their humanity. That's where true strength lies. Not in condemnation, but in restraint. Not in outrage, but in discipline. Not in being loudest, but in being most grounded in truth and compassion. There's something incredibly powerful in being able to look someone in the eye, especially someone you don't like or don't understand, and say, "You matter. You are not invisible." That kind of recognition can change the course of a life, and it can certainly change the course of a culture, because cultures are made of people, and people are shaped by how they are seen. When dignity becomes your lens, you start to see things differently. The world opens up. People stop being background noise and start becoming individuals again. And that awareness brings with it a kind of quiet responsibility, because now that you see, you can't unsee. You have to act. You have to speak. You have to respond with the kind of integrity that mirrors the value you've chosen to recognize. So take that extra second to listen more deeply, speak more carefully, forgive more quickly, stand up more consistently. These aren't just moral duties. They're acts of profound recognition. They say to the other, "I see you. I acknowledge your existence, and I will treat you accordingly." Because in the end, how we treat others, especially when there's nothing to gain, is the clearest reflection of who we truly are. Let your life reflect dignity, not just for yourself, but for every soul you encounter. That's how you honor humanity, not just in theory, but in action. One of the most misunderstood aspects of humanity is the role of compassion, not just as a feeling, but as a discipline. It's not merely about being nice or kind in a moment of sentimentality. True compassion is rigorous. It's the willingness to carry the burden of another's pain without allowing it to destroy you. It's the choice to see someone suffering, not ignore it, not excuse it, but confront it, and to say, "I will stand with you, even when it costs me something." That kind of compassion is rare, and yet it's exactly what's required if we hope to preserve any sense of collective dignity in an increasingly divided world. We live in an era of transactional empathy. People will care up to a point, as long as it's convenient, as long as it doesn't interrupt the flow of their goals, their schedule, their curated image. But real compassion doesn't work that way. It disrupts. It demands, it asks that you set aside your assumptions and listen longer than you'd like. It asks that you sit with discomfort and not immediately flee to distraction. It asks that you be human, fully human, in a world that rewards efficiency, not depth. You don't become more human by insulating yourself from the pain of others. You become more human by stepping into it, not to fix it, not to erase it, but to bear witness to it, to acknowledge it. That in itself is an act of profound moral courage, because once you've seen another person's pain and chosen to stay present, you've crossed a line. You've made a decision not to remain passive. and that decision changes you. You begin to realize that compassion is not weakness, it is strength under control. It is the kind of strength that does not need to dominate or convert or win. It only needs to affirm you are not alone. That's a deeply spiritual act, one that goes far beyond religious boundaries. It reaches into the very architecture of who we are as human beings. And the truth is, we all carry wounds, some visible, many invisible. If we were more aware of that, if we approached every interaction with the quiet understanding that the person in front of us might be fighting a battle they never speak about, our conversations would change. Our judgments would soften. Our responses would slow down, not because we are excusing wrongdoing, but because we are anchoring ourselves in reality. The reality that every soul we meet is just as fragile and sacred as our own. Compassion also calls for courage, because once you see suffering, you can't just walk away without consequence. You either become complicit in the indifference, or you take responsibility. That might look like helping someone up when they fall, or it might look like having the hard conversation, holding someone accountable, saying the uncomfortable truth with care. All of that is compassion too, compassion with a spine. And perhaps most importantly, compassion has to extend to yourself. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. You cannot extend mercy to others if you have declared war on your own soul. Many people walk through life crushed not by what others have done to them, but by what they've done to themselves, through shame, through guilt, through silence. But healing begins when you apply the same tenderness inward that you offer outward. That is not indulgence, that is wisdom. In the end, compassion is not a strategy, it's not a technique, it's a way of being. It's the daily decision to remain soft in a world that constantly tries to harden you. And if you can do that, if you can resist the cynicism, the numbness, the apathy, you become a living reminder that humanity is not lost, it's just waiting to be remembered. So let your compassion be bold, let it be inconvenient, let it interrupt your comfort, because that's how it becomes real, and that's how it changes not just others, but you. If there is one truth that echoes through every great moral tradition, every sacred text, and every deeply lived life, it is this: we do not exist in isolation. We are bound to one another, not by choice, but by nature. Humanity is not an abstract idea. It is a daily decision, a decision to show up, to speak truth, to extend compassion when it's hard, to forgive when it's painful, and to love when it seems foolish. What we do for others, we ultimately do for ourselves. The cruelty we allow corrodes us. The injustice we ignore implicates us. But the kindness we offer, even quietly, rebuilds the fabric of the world, one thread at a time. That is the silent revolution of humanity. It doesn't need fanfare. It simply needs people willing to carry the torch through the darkness, even when no one is watching. You are not powerless. You are not too small to make a difference. Your voice, your presence, your choices, they ripple outward in ways you will never fully see, and that is exactly why they matter so deeply. So leave this not with comfort, but with conviction. Be the kind of human who reminds others what humanity looks like. Because in a world that often forgets, the ones who remember will always lead the way forward.